Brilliant. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Secretary General.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back. I was here a year ago, and it's good to be back again.
Brilliant. My first question is about what it's like to be NATO Secretary General. You've actually been Secretary General for nearly a decade. You have to work with a lot of different countries and leaders. And I'm wondering, has that tenure given you any particular insight into how to keep NATO united and successful? What is your secret?
I don't know whether I have any secrets, but I think it's very much about keeping people together and different people together, because as you all know, we are 31 nations which are members of NATO, and soon we will be 32 with also Sweden, from both sides of the Atlantic, with different history, different culture, different political parties in power. And of course, that makes us all quite different. But at the same time, we have been able to be together as a big family, and I feel that my main purpose is to keep this big family happy and together. And we are able to be together despite our differences, because we all understand that in a more dangerous world, we are safer when we are together, North America and Europe. So my perhaps not secret, but my main message is that stay together. Unity is our biggest strength. And I used to be Prime Minister in Norway for 10 years, and most of that time I was Prime Minister in a coalition government with different parties, and to keep a government together is very much the same as to keep NATO together.
Could you tell us about some of the most formative experiences in your career? You mentioned a couple highlights just now, but how did you become Secretary General of NATO? What did that path look like?
Well, also, I was surprised when I was asked to become Secretary General of NATO, because I have never planned for being that. Actually, I made one decision, one clear, conscious decision about my career, and that was to not become a politician, but to start to work as a researcher in the Central Bureau of Statistics in Norway in 1989, because then I have finished my master degrees in economics in Norway, and I started on a PhD on something called econometrics, which is statistics and mathematics, and I was so fascinated by that. So my plan was to become a kind of professor and an academic, working on this very, very theoretical stuff. And then I was asked suddenly to become the Deputy Minister for Environment, and I promised myself and my wife only to do that for a year or two, and then to go back to the real important things, which was this research. But then that happened in 1990, and since then I've been in politics, and now I'm 64 years old. So suddenly I'm here. But then I was active in domestic Norwegian politics, and my main focus was on budgets and health and education and pensions and these big domestic issues, and then I was also become Secretary of NATO. But I think that my formative years has been very much about actually growing up in a very political family, because I have to admit that both my mother and my father, they were very, as I say, active. I grew up in a flat, or where at the kitchen table my parents had many guests from all over the world. This was in the time of the apartheid, so we had freedom fighters from South Africa, and we had politicians and trade unionists from all over the world, and they partly lived in our flat and at least had breakfast in our flat, and I listened carefully to all those conversations, and that made me interested in politics. So actually, to try to answer your question, I think my most formative thing is, of course, that I decided to go into politics, and I stayed in politics for many years.
Something very unexpected as well, so it just shows you how life can take turns you don't anticipate. No. My next question actually kind of has a little bit to do with your family background and the influences of your family. I think a lot of young people feel kind of a sense of discomfort about war. For some, it's thankfully a completely unfamiliar experience, and for some, it presents a lot of disconcerting moral and ethical dilemmas. And I'm wondering, drawing on your own experiences as a young person growing up in your family, committed to social justice, I believe you even protested against the Vietnam War, what would you say to young people today who are grappling with those difficult feelings about armed conflict? How can we reconcile our ethical and moral discomfort with the unfortunate reality of war?
But first of all, I don't think it's only young people that feel discomfort with wars. Actually, I think just a woman that spoke here just a moment ago, I think she feels even more discomfort than any of us are able to feel, because she has really experienced war. And there are a lot of elderly people in Europe still who have actually lived through the Second World War. So I think this has nothing to do with young or old. I think a very normal human reaction is that you don't like wars, because wars is about use of force. It's about casualties, people being killed. So therefore, you have to remember that the main purpose of NATO is to prevent war. NATO was established after the Second World War to prevent anything like that to happen again. But as the old Romans used to say, if you want peace, you need to prepare for war. Meaning that NATO's main purpose is to deter any potential adversary. And as long as we do that, no NATO ally will be attacked, and we preserve peace, as we have done for NATO allies for for close to 75 years. So the fact that we see the need for strong NATO, for strong collective defense, for military forces, does not mean that we like wars. It means actually the opposite, that we dislike war so much that we feel that we need to invest to prevent wars from happening, and at least prevent any military attack on our countries. Then, also you came back to my family. Also, I'm born in 1959, so meaning I'm born after the Second World War. But I had a mother and a father, and I had the grandparents who all lived through the Second World War, and they told me, and they told the children so much about both the daily life, the ration cards, and how they had dark curtains to prevent air strikes, and the kind of very daily life in Oslo during the war. So sometimes I feel, and when we walked around in Oslo, my parents and grandparents, they pointed at different places where there were sabotage, and also the resistance movement attacked, and so on. So sometimes I actually felt I grew up during the Second World War, not because I really did it, but because it was so close to me, because I had family members who told me so much about it. And then the father of my mother, he actually helped Jews to leave, or to flee Norway over to Sweden, and I met one of those Jewish families, and of course that's quite moving to meet. I met he was 3 years old, a Jewish boy that was helped by my grandfather to go to Sweden. And the father of my father, he was an officer in 1940, so he fought then back in April and May and June of 1940, and then he was in a prison camp, and he also told a lot. So in that sense, wars have been part of my childhood, even though I never, of course, experienced war.
Thank you very much for that. Let's go to the audience for a few questions.